to today's presentation on building a business case for online engagement from Bang the Table. My name is Mark Pivon, and I am an Engagement Solutions Manager from Bang the Table. All right, so this presentation will cover the essentials of building a business case for an online engagement project, or any project for that matter. We'll cover all the things you need to put on paper to check off the important boxes, including the needs assessment, timing, budgets, resources required, alternative choices, risks, all the meat and potatoes of a business case. But I also like to get into the stuff other folks don't tell you, like what would you do to build confidence in your audience? How come some business cases always see the light of day and others remain buried among dozens of other requisitions? I'll tell you what you need to emphasize, and I'll even tell you how to tell the story so your audience sees things from your point of view. Finally, time allowing, we'll look at a few examples of successful online engagement projects. Now, to create this presentation, I relied upon two specific guides. The first was a guide published by the Treasury Board Secretariat entitled simply Business Case Guide. You can download a template by going to the TBS website located through the link listed here, or just clicking on bit.ly/GC Business Case. Now, I also referenced material provided by the Harvard Business Review in a guide entitled The HBR Guide to Building Your Business Case. Good to have a couple of frameworks, and certainly keeps everything on track. Starting with the essentials, every business case should have a table of contents that looks something like this. There's an executive summary, business needs, project needs, schedules, impacts, risks, financials, and so on. And for this presentation, I'll go through a business case that would be written for an online engagement project for a federal government agency in Canada. At the end of the presentation, I'll also send all participants a link to a business case template that you can use for your own projects, which should require, well, quite frankly, very little customization. Briefly start by stating the problem or opportunity. Describe how you plan to address it, labeled as solutions here. And this case reviews three options, probably the maximum number you would ever want to present. Often there will only be one or two, and preview the benefits for each option and why the solution makes sense. Also state the return on investment, the ROI. It's a satisfying end to your story. And in our case, really, we're looking at payback because we're not really creating products or anything like that that generate revenue. But there may also be a need to acknowledge a do-nothing option. A business case addresses a question, what happens if we take this course of action? So it's important when building your case to consider the consequences of doing nothing. But you don't always need to present it. Sometimes just be aware of it because the reviewers may decide the project is either too costly or other initiatives are more worthwhile or urgent. All right. The business needs. The purpose of defining the business need is to establish a sense of urgency for the opportunity or solution. And you would proceed by describing why you are proposing the project, what's the business need, explicitly connecting the need to your organization's strategic goals, and then finally sharing the data that conveys the urgency. So what would this look like? Well, I start off right here with a very bold statement, right? That emphasizes the need for relevance and to fulfill the duties of office at the federal level. So I draw attention to the imperative of the Canadian government to remain connected with its citizens. It's also a component of our individual and collective responsibilities as public servants to engage the public, reflected in the current action plan on open government and of our ministers. For example, in the action plan, Commitment 19 states the Government of Canada will create ongoing mechanisms for strengthening dialogue with civil society in support of open government activities. And then Commitment 20 actually states the Government of Canada will foster enhanced citizen participation through greater collaboration and co-creation with the public and stakeholders within and across government initiatives. And then finally, on the right-hand side, every ministerial mandate letter contains 2 full paragraphs on the need to engage and solicit feedback from Canadians and with peers. And excerpts from each of those paragraphs are presented here. Next up is the needs analysis. And this is an important juncture in the business case. The rest of the case is built from this section, which shows your analysis of the problem. But if your stakeholders don't understand and agree with your articulation of the problem, they're probably going to take issue with everything else in your business case. The first step is to describe the underlying issues and their solutions using data. You might include data on citizen complaints, for example, or calls to the call center, or input from end users, or other information from those most affected by the matter that you're trying to consult on. And it may sometimes be helpful to illustrate the problem with a visual representation, as I've done here, like this process graphic. And other project types may call for different types of visuals, but ultimately it's about helping to visually communicate information or large data sets to your audience who may have a very limited time to review the material that you're proposing. The project overview. You want to help stakeholders understand the scope of your proposed project. So start off by providing a high-level description of the solutions. You may want to describe the impact, the potential audience reach, or the geographic boundaries that the project will influence, and also explain how it fits in with existing offerings or business processes it will affect, and which costs it will eliminate or reduce. And then when including more than one option, as we've done in the earlier section, highlight key differences so that stakeholders can quickly compare. So for example, I've done this here. We've got the 3 options previously referenced, and this is how I might approach an analysis of the options surrounding an online engagement project. So the best way I find is to create a table listing all the possible ideas. And when you start out, don't prejudge your ideas. Dare to be a little crazy at first, because it may help to shape other ideas going forward. You can always knock them off later, but at a minimum, you don't want to be caught off guard by someone asking whether you considered a certain approach. So brainstorming all the possibilities will help you look prepared and prove an unbiased evaluation of all the options were conducted when it mattered most. So for example, in an engagement setting, something that's not listed here, maybe you might choose to do facilitate online engagement at libraries on kiosks. So just manning a kiosk at a library and helping people navigate through the options, whatever it is. Or another one would be to do nothing. So, and then finally, under each column, list all the positives and negatives for each idea, right? You want to rank each idea to help you determine which is the best course of action. Scheduling. If your options require different schedules, then you might want to note the differences in duration. And depending on your stakeholder preferences, you may want to include additional details such as key milestones or major deliverables. Now, there are almost always risks to a project schedule. You may want to include them here or in a separate risks section, which we actually do in this presentation. Online engagement offers a few advantages over face-to-face consultation that significantly impact scheduling and timelines. This is especially valuable in engagements that are time-sensitive or where resources are limited. Many online engagement projects can live and can be live and collecting data in hours. So if we allow for some custom configuration, text, images, branding, things like that, then a reasonable timeline is about 2 weeks to enable sign-offs from all vested parties. Being able to engage community so quickly is also is a time where you can be generating feedback and payback or ROI. It's also a time that can be used to test out different engagement strategies to see what works best, or to pause participation when something is found to be miscommunicated or misunderstood, which enables you to revise the engagement plan accordingly, putting your best foot forward for the duration of the engagement period. In a face-to-face setting, you're renting halls, catering, having resources, maybe even flown to a specific destination. That is a full commitment. You're all in. Whereas with an online strategy, you can test the waters first, see how people are responding, what are they responding to, and then launch a face-to-face strategy. So that's just one approach that I like to take. Now the impacts. And in this section, we're only going to present the benefits. In later sections, I'll address costs, and the final ROI calculation will take both costs and benefits into account. Only include the benefits under the impacts that you can quantify. All right? Define the impact as precisely as you can, and you may want to mention additional intangible benefits such as improved morale or increased citizen satisfaction or engagement or voter turnout or whatever it is. But stakeholders looking at your business case will want to know the financial impacts. And note which parts of the organization that the project will affect and how. So be clear about where the numbers come from. Did you get them from folks in finance or communications or wherever? The stakeholders will care about the sources for these assumptions and are more likely to trust your numbers if the information comes from people that they trust. All right? I'm going to take a quick sidebar here. There are 4 ways to calculate return on investment, but the challenge with engagement type projects is that they don't often generate revenue or tangible assets, which almost inevitably eliminates everything except the payback period. We'll explore some of the things you can actually quantify very shortly. Also is the International Association for Public Participation. Another way to measure impact is through this specific spectrum, and it describes the impact of public participation. Now, all levels of government in Canada and many around the world use the IAP2 spectrum of public participation and have committed to move up the spectrum to more meaningful levels of public involvement. But of course, there's a catch-22 of a single citizen engagement project is that the impacts are not known until the promise to the public is accurately defined. In other words, the more open you are, the more control you surrender, the greater the impact of the consultation, or at least one might think. But what if there's no engagement, right? How do you measure impact when people don't submit responses to your online engagement practice? It's like holding an open house and nobody puts up their hand to speak. And then, so in this case, some projects may also be constructed just as awareness programs. Their focus is primarily on simply educating the project. So how do you track engagement without actual engagement activity to support it? Conversely, other projects may genuinely seek out citizen feedback and decision-making, but voter apathy, or participant apathy in this case, may stifle participation and produce results that look like a failure. They're not, but they can appear to be that way. And so that may be something that's difficult, hard to be defensible over. But I'll show you a little bit of information here in the back end. So fortunately, calculating ROI through things like payback will rely heavily on the data collected in the platform that tie directly to the number of visitors to the site. Even if the visitors do not engage with the topic, it will still track and report on a community's awareness and understanding of the subject matter. Actions such as video plays, document downloads, page impressions, infographic unique views, this kind of data is vital because most people only engage when they are especially passionate about something. The majority of citizens will visit a site, they'll poke around and leave. All right? So relying only on engagement numbers is only a look at really half the story. And so there's me, all right? And that's the case in point. Demographic data will capture some personal things about me, but let me tell you, I guess, a story about me first. So I live in Surrey, British Columbia. And even if you've never been here, you'll probably have heard the catchphrase, better safe than Surrey, right? It's a huge municipality with some very troubled neighborhoods. A lot of drug dealing, and you've probably heard about people overdosing and stuff like that on the news from bad drugs going around. But the area that I live in, which is South Surrey, doesn't really have a crime problem. In fact, what we have is very high real estate. We have transportation and accessibility issues. We have overcrowded schools. My kids are going into grade 2 next year, and their school is clearing the way for 10 new portables. The point is that public consultation on crime might interest me or it might not. But a public consultation on education, on accessibility, on transportation, on new land use permits being issued, that's stuff that interests me. So online engagement can certainly deliver demographic data, but by reviewing my surfing habits on the site, you also get a feel for the things that interest me and what I care about, even though I never explicitly told anyone anything. A single project might capture someone's attention, but multiple projects inspires action and generates engagement. And most of the time, once you sign up with some kind of an engagement platform, it's there. It's not like you're only restricted to use it one time or another. You can use it multiple times for multiple purposes, right? So over the long, and this is really the point, is that an online engagement platform is a long play. It's a long tail play. And here are 17 different reasons to leverage an online engagement platform in some capacity when launching an engagement project, augmenting face-to-face. Now, I'm not going to get into all the definitions of these, but just as examples, all right, so building an online community. So the definition here, the outcome, you have an increased, you build an increasing audience over time. An online platform provided by your organization will direct interested citizens to this site. Once people become accustomed to engaging with the organization, they're much more inclined to participate in the future as well. Once people have signed up, you can reach out to them with newsletters, emails, targeting subgroups of your database, and the job of your team gets easier as more people get involved. With a platform, each project adds value. And so one thing that you quantify here is just the number of registrations and the number of participants within the platform. Next up is time and resource compression. So online engagement enables proponents to conduct activities without the added expense of travel, renting facilities, hiring additional facilitators, catering, and so on. These expenses are very easily quantified and substituted. And launching a site does not require the added involvement of scarce IT resources as well. Today, most online engagement solutions are cloud-based, can be deployed in, quite frankly, in minutes. Leveraging pre-configured templates and support wizards and having a consistent look and feel behind the platform, the learning curve to implementing and maintaining an online engagement project, quite frankly, is very nominal. All right. Increased and diversified engagement. Now, digital engagement gives the public a more interactive and convenient and informative way to participate in decision-making. And governments can use their online presence to ask their constituents for feedback, new ideas, spending priorities, or policy and issues decisions. But digital engagement can also increase public understanding of decisions and foster potential support for ongoing implementations. So a key benefit of digital engagement for governments is engaging hard-to-reach people and expanding input beyond the usual suspects who come to face-to-face meetings often or write letters to council or elected officials or whoever. So having an online platform enables you to diversify and increase engagement by connecting with unique demographic groups like young people, families, people with mobility challenges who are potentially less likely to attend public meetings but are still comfortable participating digitally. And once an English site has been set up, or a French site, vice versa, it's very easy to recreate that exact same infrastructure in both languages. So through demographic reporting and whatnot, these audiences are very easily quantified in an online engagement platform. Just two more to go. Measurable output online is best suited towards generating strong purpose-built reports that can be used by both management and elected officials to formulate and approve policy and projects for the organization based on very strong analytics. So you will also own the data produced, unlike a lot of social media platforms. In fact, this last piece is probably the single largest deterrent to using social media exclusively as an engagement medium and as an oft-cited risk in business cases like this. Now, we certainly do not discourage the use of social media. What we try to promote is using social media as a mechanism to promote your online engagement destination, but it's a lot safer place for people to have true discourse. And then lastly, flexibility. Now, the online platform can be used to add an unlimited number of topics to consult upon while accessing an existing base of participants. This adds value and further increases the online community that will routinely engage with the organization on new and emerging issues. So the organization can readily share the information as well with recent open government initiatives and subsequently adding value to all participants and management, elected officials, all according to, well, privacy laws and things like that. So if we said it enough times already, but just to reiterate, if you engage frequently on lots of topics and across multiple boundaries, either perceived or real, you will eventually build a complete picture of the citizen. Now, the risks. All right. What you want to try to do in the risks section is to explain what might not go as planned, whether positive or negative. Most people just focus on the threats, like, oh, what if I get this online system and then the guy, disappears on me or something like that? Or what if the costs of things go through the roof? And but you need to consider opportunities as well. Like, how could you potentially capture a faster payback, or could you complete the project sooner? Right? So some of those are also risks. You've allocated a specific amount of time and resources and things like that. Think about all the positives and negatives, and include major risks associated with both doing and with not doing the project. If you're listing several options, like as in this example earlier, we had 3 specific options, right? Go online, go face-to-face, or do a hybrid project. Explain how the risks, differ across alternatives, and identify the likelihood of the risks, whether it's high, medium, or low, high, moderate, or low. And then the primary risks you'll want to consider are always going to be costs and scheduling. But you may also want to think about some other things, like personnel. Well, what if people running the project leave the agency? What if you don't get all the team members that you requested? What if personnel resist using the platform to engage their communities and only focus on what they're used to using? Like, I only use email, or I only use face-to-face. What if the project needs to include more or fewer geographic regions or stakeholders? And what if people change requirements throughout through the process? And then, or even what if the platform that you're using doesn't perform as you expect it to, for better or worse, right? What if sometimes it may be that you end up having an overwhelming amount of engagement, and that could actually be indicative of a problem in your communications, right? So there's very high engagement can be good, very low engagement can be good, but they can also be bad as well, depending on how people are responding online. So something to think about. Here I've just created a little chart to help you understand one way to approach this. So the biggest risk, in my opinion, to an online engagement platform is to pretend people won't go somewhere else to find answers. People will go somewhere else. If they can't find the answers on your website or somewhere in the literature that you're providing, they'll go to social media or to other places that are creating noise, and that's the last place you want people to go, because now you've got your back up against the wall and you're in a defensive position. Now, risk also depends on the tools that you use. So decide on something that suits the risk profile that you've got. Online may not be the right thing, or in fact, there are a variety of different tools in online platforms that that may suit the engagement strategy. So you may not want to have everybody talking freely online. Instead, you may want to just have people asking questions and responding to questions privately. Or you may want to have people just conduct an ideation tool where people are submitting ideas and then the community votes on their favorite ideas, not having a lot of discussion. There's a variety of and degrees of openness and transparency and closed consultation that you can conduct online. Setting the context. So you should also try to establish some ground rules early so everybody plays fair. And then always try to attract different perspectives, or quite frankly, you'll always be listening to the usual suspects. So don't be afraid to go out and talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to, right? Launch tools for 2-week periods and then extend. So run an iterative platform. This is some of the ways to mitigate the risks. And then invest in community facilitation to flesh out better ideas and create safety. I highly recommend this. If you invest in having people who are facilitators in face-to-face consultations, it's perfectly acceptable to run facilitation in online engagements as well, just as long as you're transparent. Otherwise, you're going to look like you're trolling the site and trying to build bias in the consultation as well. And then finally, let's get into the right way to present a business case. I always recommend that you should lead with the need. Now, in order to grab the attention of your audience from the outset, identify immediately the business need that you're trying to address, and begin by asking yourself, what is the message that I'm trying to get across, right? Is there a market opportunity we're overlooking? Do we need to engage people in Nunavut? So clearly articulating this need as soon as you begin, because no matter how well researched or innovative you think things are, you won't get support if the need isn't apparent or convincing. So just make sure that you make sure that the need aligns with the organization's goals and strategies. So tell a story. Now, a story can be as simple as just outlining the need, the impact, and the solution. So telling stories in powers of 3 tends to keep an audience engaged. Now, the key to present what's at stake is to do it through a clear arc, right? Beginning, middle, and end. But the more you can inject an emotional appeal or a human connection to your narrative, the stronger and more memorable your case will be. And this could mean illustrating the effects of a proposed, system with testimonials from actual citizens, or describing how a storytelling project, you may want to expand how you helped keep people connected during a disaster. Or so with a business case, odds are that you're always trying to insert change. And the first reaction to that change is typically fear. The only real way to get your audience to overcome their reluctance is to appeal to the heart and not the mind. And that's done by telling stories. And then finally, I always like to co-create, addressing individuals' concerns, addressing the individual concerns of stakeholders that will be receiving your business case. It goes a long way towards winning you allies. So for example, if somebody in finance is fretting about keeping expenses under control, discuss expenses, right? If you have someone who is interested in growth in Nunavut, well, show how your project will improve services in the region. And also research past presentations and the outcomes to make sure you have all your bases covered. For example, there may have been issues that other projects had, and if you have an answer for those, it'll just make you look a lot more prepared going forward. You might also consider giving decision makers a preview of your presentation ahead of time and asking for their input. Once you get that, you can salt their recommendations into your business case, which will obviously increase their investment in your success, because they'll feel like they are representing that you're representing their own ideas as well.
And this concludes today's presentation on building a business case for online engagement. My name is Mark Pivon, and I invite anyone interested in following up with me on this presentation either to comment or contribute further via LinkedIn or Twitter. My channel addresses are listed here, and I can also be emailed directly at mark.pivon@bangthetable.com. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to speaking with you again.